Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Saphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts.
And I'm Camille Barron, a financial coordinator also in Sharon, Massachusetts. And you know, Roberta, with all of the changes that keep happening in the legal and financial sectors, it's just nonstop. One in particular, of course, is the new tax law. And we have some folks who are going to enlighten us about that today. One of them is a return guest.
Absolutely. It's our own Emily Smith-Lee, also an attorney in Sharon, and also the chair of our advisory board. And I always say she's brilliant, and she never disagrees with me. Anyway,
I'm afraid to disagree with you. Perhaps that proves your point.
And with you, we have our new friend, accountant Doug Coval. Did I spell it?
You said it perfectly, nailed it.
See, now we really are friends. But why don't we start off? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First, thank you for having me on the program. I'm really excited to be here. I grew up in Sharon. I graduated in 2003. I am a licensed CPA in Massachusetts. I work for my father's CPA firm in Easton, Robert Coval CPA. Been working there for over 10 years. We have an office in Easton on 138 and also in South Yarmouth. And we do a lot of different things, and one of the key things we deal with is tax returns for individuals and businesses.
Oh, that's good. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a younger sister. Her name is Tracy. I believe she graduated Sharon High School around 08.
Sharon.
Very good.
Yeah, it was great. I loved growing up here. It was fantastic.
What is she doing?
She is studying to get her master's in clinical work. She was doing a lot of graduate level work at Simmons right now, so she's just wrapping up school.
So the business will be yours. You won't have any competition.
I just got to write my dad a nice little check and see what happens, I guess.
Now, is he an LLC or something?
He is a DBA, sole proprietor. He is not a sole practitioner, or he's not an LLC, excuse me.
Oh, so this is basically our topic with the way things are going. Maybe after he sees you, he'll change his entity. Hi, Emily.
Okay.
So the thing is, what's the best way? We'll get right to it. Somebody has a business, whether it's a cleaning business, an accounting business, a 5-cent store. What do they call them? 5 and dimes.
They used to anyway.
And they're buying a piece of land, and then they're going to also have their business in there. What do you tell them? They're coming to the two of you for advice. They're afraid with the way things are going out there that somebody will trip and fall or make believe.
So I'll hit the legal part. In the end, a lot of the decision between different kinds of corporate entities will default to the tax consequences, which is Doug's field. But, there's no law against being a DBA, against running something without an entity. It is the liability. An LLC and an S-Corp are going to be very similar in terms of the liability. You can't escape it entirely. Some things, like employment laws, you're still going to have some personal liability. If you're a startup, as a practical matter, people are going to want you to personally guarantee things, but you want to make sure that the rest of that liability is kept within the business. So to your question, Roberta, the more buckets you can have, the better. Your real estate in one bucket, your business in one bucket, so that if somebody has a slip and fall on your real estate, it doesn't put your business in peril either.
Well, what about what they used to do? Years ago, we used to do simple nominee trusts, hide the beneficiary, and by the time they went to see that it was a trust, they wouldn't bother. Or maybe they would.
From a liability perspective, that's another avenue. You can do that.
Do people do that? Do you recommend that? Do they do that anymore?
I don't see it that often, but that doesn't mean people don't do it. It is another vehicle. All of these are just tools from the legal perspective to cordon things off in their own buckets, whether that's a trust, an LLC, an S-Corp. I got to talk to your dad about the fact that he's a DBA.
We can have
That
a great
doesn't
chat.
help. What about the small business who, when they first started up, the LLCs were no charge. So now they're $500 a year, plus then you got to pay the accountant for a separate tax return.
Yep, you're correct. So an LLC provides you legal liability protection, and we recommend it for asset protection when we're meeting with men and women who either own property or businesses. An LLC is great because for $500 a year, it's legal liability protection. We like to say keep it simple right there. I don't need a separate tax return. I don't need a payroll company. The income and loss flows onto your Schedule C or Schedule E if it's real estate. And it's a very simple tactic right there. And for $500 a year, we encourage legal liability protection. We like to focus on asset protection, and that's a great tool.
What about W-2s? Do they have to have W-2s?
No, as a single member LLC, they're not required to go on payroll. So basically, they're subject to 3 tax. They're subject to federal tax, state income tax, and self-employment tax. So they just pay themselves.
Well, what if it's a husband and wife? Is that still treated as a single?
They have IRS protocol that you can have a husband and wife split Schedule C. So if you and I started a business, it would be a partnership, and we would need a separate tax return filing. If we were married, then we could have a joint Schedule C and not need a separate tax return, just to clarify.
And I want to clarify one thing. I think when you ask about payroll, you're talking about the owner.
Yep, correct.
The employees of an LLC
Yep, correct.
still
As
need
an
to be
owner, you would just
W-2.
take an owner's draw. You wouldn't require to get a W-2. If you have an employees, then yes, you should have payroll to compensate them that way through an LLC.
Well, this gets into the now divorce law.
Everything's connected.
Everything's connected. If you have an LLC, you're saying it should just be in the husband's name or the wife's name and not in both names? Are you saying that?
Oh, no, what I was saying is just going back to an earlier point. Even though the owner is compensated as a pass-through, the employees have to be W-2. I think, Doug, what you're saying is you can do it husband and wife.
Yes, correct.
with
So
the
if
same-
we both owned a business together, we could set up the LLC together and take an owner's draw as a concept if we're both owners of the business right there. That's what I was referring to right there. Versus I own the business and you work for me as an employee, and I would have to compensate you as a W-2 employee.
But if the owners can be husband and wife and still get the benefits of a single LLC? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. We want to be clear on
Yep,
that.
no,
Yeah.
that's a great avenue right there versus having a separate tax return. The LLC can work for the husband and wife together in that situation.
Well, one of the arguments for DBA used to be Flatley, who owned all the property and everything. We were told that he just went to DBA with all that property, but that was years ago. I don't know.
So a DBA for real estate is risky. So if there's ever a legal liability issue and there's a lawsuit, all of the assets are commingled, so personal assets and the building. An LLC is a great legal liability protection tool because if there's a lawsuit, I can only go after the assets of the LLC. All of my personal assets are protected. And one of the biggest things we talk to people is not being able to pierce the corporate veil, which I'm sure you can elaborate on.
Yeah, what do you mean by pierce the corporate veil? You're
So-
going to ask that.
The corporate
away from
form
them,
protects you from liability as long as you honor it. So if I set up a corporation for the liability protection, but I'm really passing money back and forth, not observing formalities, treating it kind of as a fiction, then somebody who sues my company can pierce the corporate veil, basically on the argument that it's not real, and come after my assets. So whatever you set up, whether it's an S corp or an LLC, you got to make sure you pay attention to it. That if you have bylaws that say you have meetings, that you track your money, that if you're paying yourself, it's reflected as if you were an arm's length person with the business. Is that
Yep, usually one of the biggest things we talk about are personal expenses being paid by the LLC. So a great lawyer like Emily, if comes up a lawsuit, she could potentially pierce the corporate veil and be like, well, you're running all your personal expenses through the business. It's not really a business, and I think you're not entitled to that legal liability protection. What we often tell people is if you have personal expenses, great. Take an owner's draw once a month or once a quarter and pay all those expenses personally so you maintain the corporate veil. That's a big thing we talk to people about.
Is that something a lot of people try to get, sort of use as a loophole?
Yeah, I think a lot of people aren't really understanding the legal liability concept. And if there are potential issues, lawyers like Emily will be able to put a feather in their cap and be like, well, I can pierce the veil. So that's a really big thing we try to talk to men and women about in order to protect the legal liability you're paying $500 a year for. Otherwise, what's the
Right.
point?
Right, exactly.
Is it easier to pierce an LLC or subchapter S?
It doesn't make a
matter?
difference.
It would probably be the same concept either way. It's just really proving that I'm able to do it, and really personal stuffs are not following the guidelines of the business.
Are more people going with an LLC because you don't have to make out a separate tax return for it?
So that's a great question. Usually for tax perspective, we talk to people about the concept of an LLC versus an S corporation. LLC, like I said, keep it simple. And usually we talk to people about setting up an S corporation to save on self-employment tax. As I talked about earlier, as a single member LLC, you're self-employed. I'm not paying myself a W-2, and there's no withholdings, and there's no Social Security and Medicare being paid. So you're subject to 3 tax on the profit: Fed, state, and self-employment. Usually we talk...
Wait. So you have to pay Social Security. You have to pay self-employment tax on an LLC.
Correct. So you're self-employed. So typically as an employee, your employer is paying your half of the self-employment and Medicare, and you're paying your self-employment and Medicare to make that 15.3%. As someone who's self-employed, no one's paying you a W-2 salary, so you're responsible to pay the self-employment and Medicare portion. And that's what we're referring to. An S corporation, typically there is out-of-pocket tax savings if you're making over $100,000 after paying yourself. And the reason why, as an S corporation, I only pay 2 income taxes on the profits. I pay federal and state income tax, excuse me. And the big catch-22 is the government says, well, you need to be taking a reasonable compensation so we're able to get our self-employment and Medicare tax. And basically what that requires is the owner to go on as a W-2 employee and take a reasonable salary.
How much? Isn't there, it used to be that I'm dating myself, once you paid $50,000 in Social Security taxes, you didn't have to pay any more than that.
That's a separate issue on that. I think you're referring to the max of the self-employment
Yeah,
earning
yeah.
wages, which I believe is over $120,000 right
So you
there.
can stop after $120,000.
Well, that's one of the big things we talk about. What is an adequate reason?
120?
Yeah,
So
it's
how much is that? 15.9%?
15.3%, and then after that it's the
15.3?
Medicare portion, which is 0.9%. So basically,
I'm trying to, how much are we left with in the end?
a couple of bucks here or there, I would bet, right there. So there's a lot of tax savings because instead of paying the full profit at 3 taxes, I can only pay at 2 taxes right there and only be subject to a W-2 salary for the self-employment. That's where we usually talk to people, and usually a rule of thumb is, if not in the short term but the long term, you're going to be having a profit after paying yourself of $100,000. There's usually sizable out-of-pocket tax savings versus the cost to set up an S corporation.
Lot to
So
absorb here.
there's, I can see a little knowledge, as the years go by, my knowledge gets littler because they keep upping these things. But like the landlord, isn't that called passive income?
So
you don't
passive-
have to pay
Right, so if you have real estate, that's referred to as passive income. I'm not actively working in it, and I'm making money not engaged in a business. So that typically comes in the form of rental real estate or portfolio income or stock sales right there. That's what's referred to as passive income right there.
Now, if someone is brand new to this, someone's going to open up their own business, are there other options besides the 2 that we talked about to consider? And
let
if so,
Emily answer that.
what other options might there be for, say, a small, either sole proprietor or a very small business?
I mean, you could be a DBA. You can get yourself a tax ID number and even employ people as a DBA. You can carry on. There's no law against it.
Tell the viewers what a DBA is in case they
Doing
don't
business
know.
as,
Yeah.
you know,
Now, suppose
If I'm-
suppose an individual decides to do that, and let's say they have their assets in a trust, an irrevocable trust. That's this is aside from a business.
Yep.
Does that in itself protect their assets if they just choose to be a DBA.
Well, that's a good one,
Yeah.
huh? That's a
I
good
mean,
question.
you could, through a variety of planning tools, you could otherwise shelter your assets through an irrevocable trust, through other things. I would say yes, it protects their assets as they exist at that moment.
Yeah.
Life isn't constant, you know, and I think what we tell people is better, as Doug says, for $500 a year, better to put it in place for the future, for the things you haven't considered.
Right.
Then you've got 2 layers of protection. Because let's say somebody challenges the trust.
Right. Now, another situation, of course, this
She's
is
got a
more.
lot of key words this trip, like bucketful and this and that.
Got
Was
good
that-
buzzwords. I like
Yeah,
it.
she's
There
got,
you go.
yeah, she's got a lot of good ones. Yeah, go ahead. Good
No,
questions.
you remember, everybody knows this, but you know, corporations were established. You know, that was one of the main purposes of corporations, and in the definition of a corporation, it talks about a person, but not a natural person, right? It talks about that.
Entity.
So,
Entity.
is there? My point is that in that Supreme Court decision that everybody knows about, the 2010 Citizens United, the court interpreted a person to have a non-natural person to have the same rights as a natural person, among them freedom of speech. And that's where the whole thing about the Citizens
Campaign
United.
finance.
And my reason for bringing this up is we're talking about entities that shield business owners from liability. If a case were to go to court and it was challenged, is there ever a chance that the same type of reasoning would apply even to a small business that applied to the large case of?
I think she's asking, is there a chance that the protection, they'll say there is no protection because you're really just an individual. Is that what
Oh.
you're asking?
Sort of.
Interesting. So first I will say, ever since that decision, in the back of my mind, I've been looking for somebody with a 35-year-old corporation that I could run for president to truly test the natural person theory. To your real question, though, I think unlikely. You know, the liability protection is so core to the invention of the corporation under our legal system. I think it's far more likely that you have a risk on the veil piercing theory than that you have some wholesale
Yeah.
ripping of the corporate fabric.
Now, is that just I'll get back to the subject. Boy, that was a
I
deep
went off
one.
the subject, didn't
That
I?
was no. That was a good
Well, I
question.
try to think of all the ways that this
Yeah,
might
boy.
not hold
Somebody
up.
might do that as a test case. But I was thinking like your limited liability and your subchapter S. Your subchapter S is federal. Is your limited liability, is that good for all the other states? Like, in other words, Joe Schmo in Alabama, can they sue you under Alabama laws, your limited liability, your LLC, and
So
say,
it-
well, we don't recognize LLCs here? Or what's...
I'm
We're
going to
really-
venture
we're really-
somewhat into waters that partly belong to Doug. I believe the subchapter S references a tax issue and therefore federal, but
Oh,
both
okay. corporations
are organized under the state law and under the full faith and credit clause. You know, they have
Guess
to
you got another
exist.
full faith and credit.
Alabama's got to recognize a Massachusetts LLC. We've got to
listen.
recognize whatever they call it.
We were really throwing you things. I mean, I'm saying, what? What? I remember following that decision, and then I've totally forgotten about it. I don't think it's come up again. Or will it come up again when people are donating, or when corporations are donating? So what do you think, Doug?
So different states, like we talked about, very common there are Delaware series LLCs, and then different states challenge it where I think Massachusetts doesn't really follow the Delaware series LLCs. You have some series LLCs, I believe, in Massachusetts.
What's series LLCs? And I've heard a lot of people run to
so
Delaware to
I
do
believe
that.
a series LLC is you have one LLC that contains many assets right there. So that cup, for example, you could have many many assets encompassed in that LLC right there
And they would all be LLCs.
right, versus having one LLC and paying the $500 every time. I believe this is kind of a highly contentious issue in Massachusetts with the Series LLC, because theoretically you're taking a big gamble. Yeah, I'm saving money on the setup cost for the LLC, but if there's a lawsuit, that whole cup of all the assets is contaminated and everything is at
Really?
fair game. So that's kind of a big thing we talk to people
We don't
about.
do that here in Massachusetts? Oh, we do, but when I don't know
So
we
I
do.
think the point is some people do that to save on the filing fee, but you're not really preserving the cocoon around each of
Yeah.
the sub-buckets
That's
that
good,
way.
you've got to be kidding. We're almost to you got to be kidding.
Ooh.
You gotta be
You've
kidding.
got to be kidding.
Gotta be kidding me.
But why do people run to Delaware? Do they still run to Delaware? They used to run for
A lot
corporations.
of corporations
We hear
are still
now
established in
LLC,
Delaware.
LLCs and farmed in Delaware. Why did they do that?
So from a legal perspective, Delaware's, wherever you organize your company, is the law that's going to govern your relationship with your shareholders, your board, your governance. Delaware's laws are written in a much more corporate favorable way in that regard. So, for example, here, a close corporation, you have a strict fiduciary duty towards your fellow shareholders. It's watered down a lot in Delaware. I don't know whether there's tax reasons people do that.
I think for a lot of the key issues you hit about more on the legal side than the actual taxation side right there, as you kind of clarified, versus Massachusetts, which is a little more stingent.
I got one last question. Like a corporation, you need articles of organization, but the LLC, do you even need anything? You just file, you don't need an agreement, you don't need articles?
You need
bylaws?
articles.
You
You
would
need
need-
articles,
Oh, yeah.
but they're very simple.
Oh, so you just,
There is
it's
a
interesting.
Usually one thing, if there's a partnership, we encourage an operating agreement where basically you're planning for the divorce ahead of time. How are we going to split the business profits, loss, capital? What's going to happen if we break up? How is everything going to get split?
Oh, that's a good idea.
And that's a key thing that Emily can certainly speak on, that we advise clients on right there.
We have to go into You've Got to Be Kidding. Emily's
gotta be kidding me.
Emily's happy about that. Afterwards, she'll say, "Where did you get these questions from?"
no, I like them.
Yeah, it's different. She's been here. She is so good. She's been here in employment law, and she's good. And no matter what tough question or swing question, I mean, it's not that we do it on purpose. It's just that it comes up. But she's pretty well versed. Must be her kids.
Plus, Emily has the book that you wrote, The Rules of the
That's
Road
right,
on
yeah.
employment law, and then one of your
yeah.
associates published a book on estate planning.
estate planning.
And that was
yeah.
excellent. So things you're really getting to be well known.
And there might be
Yeah.
another one in the works.
Oh, really?
Oh,
We'll keep you
good.
posted.
Whoa.
Is that
Good.
right?
So that you got to
That's
be kidding. Well,
fantastic.
tell us how You've Got to Be Kidding story, and we do thank you, and we love your dimples.
Thank you. I get a lot of compliments. My wife loves them too.
How long you married?
I've been going on 2 years of marriage. It's been great. One of the
Do you
great.
have a little girl?
No children yet. Maybe someday. Right now, I have a hard enough time just taking care of myself and my lovely wife. But maybe someday I'll have a nice family.
Oh, I think you will.
I hope so.
I think you will.
So I have a great "You Got to Be Kidding Me" story. So
Okay.
one of my great grandfather was the personal physician for the Boston Braves, and one of his key patients was Babe Ruth.
Oh,
So
that is a good story. You kidding? You got to be kidding?
I'm not. There's more. So then he was working on Babe Ruth in the 40s, and when he was done with his physical, he said, "Would it be okay if my son came and you signed a baseball for him?" He said, "I'd be happy to." So my great uncle, who's in his early 80s, is like 10 years old, and he gets a phone call from his dad. "Hey, get on the trolley and come down to my office." And he comes down with a baseball, and he gets a baseball signed by Babe Ruth to my pal Joey. Love Babe Ruth. So
Oh.
that's
Oh
the
my
fun
goodness.
story. Yeah, there's a big pecking
That's
order
a-
for that ball.
We say you got to be
Gotta be
kidding.
kidding.
Well, we have formerly the Saphire Manor, now the Saphire Estate. Our first food salesman was I think it was a pitcher, whatever he was, for the Boston Braves.
You got to be kidding.
You
too.
gotta
and
be
that was
kidding
when
me.
the Boston Braves had just left town.
That's so funny.
Isn't that funny? He was the food salesman. Of course, I should have asked him about Babe Ruth back then. But then he got traded to the Yankees, right? What do they call that? The Curse of the Babe? Or
Curse of the Bambino,
The
yeah.
Curse of the Bambino.
Yeah.
That's old news. We reversed that a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Now we have a great Patriots team, and Boston is great. Even though this show is going to appear in many other areas, we still have to give credit where credit is due.
And it is due, definitely due.
Yeah.
As is our time.
Yeah. Okay, go for it.
So we thank you very much. It was delightful.
thank
It was a
you.
pleasure.
to
Thank
meet
you for
you.
having me.
And it's always a
Okay.
pleasure to have Emily back. I can't even count the number of times. And it's
Oh,
always
we
something
have
new.
to count.
Always something
We'll
new.
have,
So
have
we'll
you there.
definitely
Yeah, we
like to have
wish
you
you
come
a
back
lot of
I would
sometime.
love to. That would be fantastic.
Yes, and
You're
so
very knowledgeable.
yes, he certainly is.
Yeah.
It's the dimples,
very
that's
good.
what it is,
Yeah. We couldn't catch you at all. Not that we were trying to, but Emily got a good one with you.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to
Yeah.
come back next time and
So,
chat more.
Yeah, we want to know what's going to happen with your father.
Sure. We'll have
Yeah.
we'll all go out and talk. That'd be great.
We'll talk on camera.
Sure.
We'll
Oh,
get
he'd love
him in
that.
here.
So I want to thank our viewers for watching, and of course, if you have any questions, if you or anyone you know either has a business or is thinking of starting one, obviously we have some experts here, and if you send us an email, we'll be very happy to direct your questions. Anything else that you have in your mind, please let us hear from you, whether it's suggestions for other topics or questions about topics that we've had. Because remember, this is your show, the law, your money, and
And
you.
You.